would just say your name for me and then give me your title.
Sure. My name is David Swallow, Deputy CEO with the RTC of Southern Nevada.
Okay, so all right, so some of these, well, I guess the first question is uh, there's a lot of bus stops. So you probably know how many. There's a lot of them around the valley. How many are covered and how many don't have those coverings?
Sure. The RTC has nearly 3,700 stops throughout the Las Vegas Valley. About, let's see, 1,760 of those actually have shelters at them. And we're aggressively moving forward to add more shelters here in the near future. In fact, in the last 10 years, we've installed nearly 800 new shelters throughout the valley. The year coming up, by the end of summer 2025, we plan to install nearly 300 more throughout the valley.
Are any additional, so 300 by the end of next summer, what are there any being installed right now as we lead up to that, or how does that work?
Well, just recently we installed another 25 of what we call our general market shelters. Those are the typical ones that you see throughout the valley that have kind of the wavy roof. We've also installed about nearly 120 of what we call our slimline shelters. So those are the ones where the right of way is a little constrained. We only have a 5-foot sidewalk that we're trying to fit the shelter on, and in order to make sure that everybody has, can pass by safely as they're walking along the sidewalk, we have a limited amount of space there. So we use our slimline shelters to fit in those spaces. And like I said, in the last year, we've installed nearly 120 of those.
Yeah, and so I don't know what you can or can't say about, how much money that is, but obviously everything costs money. How big of an endeavor is this financially?
Uh, Well, let's say over the last, say, dozen years, we've spent over $20 million, about $22 million on putting new shelters in throughout the Las Vegas Valley. Going forward in this next year, we'll spend probably about 16 million is what we're estimating. We do have to go out for bid on those and award to the lowest bidder. But yeah, about 16 million is how much we have programmed. And a large portion of that, over 3/4, about 80% of that is coming from federal funding sources.
Yeah, and then I know this obviously has been out in the news as well, but the plans to redo that Maryland corridor over by UNLV, we've reported on it, everyone has.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Just I know it's already been out there, but just kind of the timeline and what some of those improvements will be as well.
Yeah, great question. So, in fact, we're getting ready to take the second construction contract. We just awarded the first construction contract. The Maryland Parkway project's being split into two main segments from north of Sahara and through downtown and over to the medical district, and then south of Sahara down to the airport and even over to our South Strip terminal. And between the two, we awarded one contract last month, and we're getting ready tomorrow to award the second contract for that construction, which will start later this summer and be done by fall of 2026. Now, with the Maryland Parkway project, we're going to be installing another over 40 new shelters, and these ones are going to be much larger than our typical ones because in a project like Maryland Parkway, where we were able to garner enough funding, we're acquiring some right of way around where the stop locations are to be able to fit a bigger shelter structure in there. So it's taller, it has a larger roof, provides more shade as well as more lighting at night so that people feel more comfortable and more safe while they're waiting for our transit service. In addition to that, it's worth mentioning that the city of Henderson has the Boulder Highway, the Reimagined Boulder Highway project that is underway. There again, we'll be installing another probably close to 36 new transit shelters. Again, larger ones compared to the rest of the valley because of the available right-of-way. We'll be able to fit a larger structure in place, providing more shade and lighting for our customers.
Yeah, and then just switching gears a little bit, we just saw it the other day on pedestrian safety. Um, you know, Unfortunately, there's a lot of those types of accidents, auto versus pedestrian. Obviously, we're a city where we're a valley where there's a lot of people walking a lot of places for a lot of different
Sure.
reasons. But what's your message, if you have one, for pedestrians and for drivers as well? Um, just so that everyone can maybe be a little bit more safe out there, whether you're waiting for the bus, walking, or you're driving on our roadways.
Yeah, it's important to remember that we're all part of the same community and we all should be watching out for one another, whether you're walking, riding a bike, driving your car, even when you're taking the bus. We should all be watching out for one another. In particular, here in the valley, our community is relatively young and we really evolved around the assumption that everybody had access to a car. So we have a very robust roadway network, a grid network that's fantastic if you're driving. One of the challenges, though, is we design our roads so well that people tend to maybe drive faster than they should. And when you're driving faster than the speed limit, honestly, your focus is right in front of you and where you're driving to, not necessarily being at a speed where you can see what's going on around you and maybe things that you didn't anticipate. And I just saw yesterday coming into the office, there was a person that started crossing the road. I see him way ahead of me, no problem. But the person kept walking across it. And frankly, it was an older person. They were struggling just to get across the road. And at some point, they started crossing in front of the car in front of me. And I was taken aback. I'm like, I hope they see him. And thankfully they did, and they slowed down because the person crossing didn't even, frankly, they're so focused on crossing safely, but at the same time, they weren't looking to see what was going on around them. So I think it's important for all of us to really watch out for one another, however we're traveling. And remember, we're all trying to get somewhere. Let's get there together safely.
Yeah, great. I mean, I see that too all the time. Um, Last question here. So we get asked this too sometimes. Obviously, bus transportation for those who don't use cars or maybe can't afford it, whatever the situation is. Uh, RTC bus transportation is very important, obviously, in this town. What's what's the mass transit of the future? Are we, because people always talk about the boring company, the tunnels, okay, are those going to just go all over the valley eventually and to LA? We always talk about the high speed train to Southern California. That's something a little bit different. But what's the future of mass transit? Or is it just going to be bus travel, for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think as we've shown in the past, the RTC has really looked at how do we elevate our transit system going forward through a number of initiatives, both for regular bus service and then what we call high capacity transit, where you're looking at bus rapid transit, which is kind of like Maryland Parkway or Boulder Highway, to even light rail systems. And that's something that we want to do, but we also have to have that buy-in from the community. One, that everybody thinks it's a good idea, and secondly, we all agree on how we're going to pay for it. And so we do have a number of efforts underway as we look forward into the future in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades into the future. How do we think our valley is going to evolve? What are the transportation needs and how best to serve those needs? And so that does include a myriad of different choices, from regular bus service to the on-demand RTC on demand, like you see in the southwest part of the valley, trying to expand those different service areas, to more express lines, like you have the Game Day Express as well as the Centennial Express. How do we get more of those higher speed express lines connecting the valley together, particularly getting where people live connected to where people work, which is primarily in the middle of the valley along the resort corridor. Beyond that, we are focused on specific routes where we know there's so much ridership and so much demand that and new development that's coming in, that we need to support that growth with higher order investments. And that's where we look at, say, Charleston Boulevard. We just received a grant to look at Charleston Boulevard in more detail because Charleston is the third busiest bus route in our system. Maryland Parkway is our highest productivity route in the system, even beating out the Strip in some cases, not in total ridership, but in boardings per mile, the boardings per hour. So that's why we're making these investments to say, how do we create a network that connects the whole valley together with services that get them to where they want to go, but allowing a different choices on what's the best way to get there. And so that's what the RTC is working on.
That's all I got. Told you, be quick and easy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like that.
anything else? Anything else? Anything we're
Well,
leaving
I
out?
think it's important, it is summertime. We are dealing with some of the highest temperatures I think we've ever experienced here. And of course, we're worried about the health and well-being of everyone, particularly people that are out there on the street. They're walking, they're accessing the bus. Keep an eye out for one another. We're doing the same from the RTC's perspective, where we're partnering with organizations and businesses to distribute water, distribute sunscreen where we can, but really watching out for folks, even providing transit passes to some of the nonprofits that are getting people who maybe need to get connected with social services to help them have access to those services. And so that's what we're doing, but it really, try to stay hydrated, stay in the shade, wear good clothing to be out there in the elements and watch out for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. Appreciate your time.
All right, Brian, good chatting with you.
All right.